All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we are now going to talk about March Madness. We'll talk about the tournament and how there are some people that are, I guess, disappointed with how it's been so far because there hasn't been any Cinderella stories in this tournament. And some people, I guess, are claiming that this could be like one of the worst March Madness tournaments. And look, I think the first round, I would say there wasn't like a ton of like crazy games, but the round of 32 was pretty good. You had a lot of crazy finishes. And, some people are saying the lack of buzzer beaters. Yeah, I guess, that's true. But you did have the game with Colorado State and Maryland. Maryland hit the game winning shot at the end. So you had that. But you did have a ton of, you did have some really good games in the round of 32. And let's go back and take a look. So, round of 32 started on Saturday, right? So, I thought Arkansas St. John's was a pretty good game. I mean, Arkansas kind of pulled away at the end, but that was still a relatively competitive game throughout. And Arkansas pulled off the upset. They're a 10 seed, and now they're playing in the Sweet 16. Um, Creighton and Auburn was entertaining. Auburn kind of pulled away late. Creighton, and you got to remember, Creighton was leading before the half. The BYU Wisconsin game was crazy at the end. That was a 6 upsetting a 3. I think Wisconsin had the ball to take and had the opportunity to take the last shot. Um, yeah, and well, actually, I don't even think did they even get a shot off. There was a game where they didn't even get a shot off and they turned the ball over. But I don't know if it was this one or it was a different game. But yeah, BYU won by 2 points. Houston Gonzaga was pretty competitive towards the end there. Houston was leading big for a while, and then Gonzaga, was making a late comeback. And I think, yeah, you get down to the final, few minutes. Yeah, it was a 2-point game at one point. But Houston came away with the win there. You go to Sunday's games. The Florida UConn game. The two-time defending champions against one of the number one seeds. That was a pretty entertaining game. UConn played a very good game, but, Florida won because Florida's a better team. And it ended up being a 2-point contest. And they came away with the win. That was an entertaining game. We talked about Maryland. The Oregon-Arizona game, that got dicey at the end. Caleb Love, though, had a very good game. And then, Michigan State, New Mexico was pretty good as well. But I don't really like this notion that this is like one of the worst March Madness tournaments of all time because we're not getting any. We don't have a Cinderella team right now. Well, when's the last time a Cinderella team won the national championship? For the most part, when you have these Cinderella teams, like you have these St. Peter's or, teams like that. Well, McNeese was able to advance at least one round. But for the most part, these teams don't go very far. Maybe they go for a round or two, right? They get to the Sweet 16, and then that's it. Then they get knocked out by a better team. And that's what a lot of people are saying. You have the best teams in these final, rounds here. And that's going to set us up for some really good games. You're not going to see blowouts. And that doesn't necessarily mean that if there was a Cinderella team that it would be a blowout. But and there could be blowouts anyways. But you're going to get some really good basketball games down the stretch here in this tournament. You're getting the best of the best. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, there's a lot of people that point to NIL and the transfer portal and how, a lot of these guys from these lesser schools will go to these bigger schools and, they're hurting the little guy. And I understand that. I get that. And it's happening all over college athletics. College football, it's happening as well. But that's just how it is. I don't know if that's necessarily going to ruin college basketball. You know, college basketball is very popular. My friends are more into it than I am. But I really only watch. I mean, I have put on some of the big SEC games. I was watching the Big East tournament with St. John's. I did watch some of those games, and obviously I watched Quinnipiac in the conference tournament because I was hoping maybe they could squeak in. But that's besides the point. College basketball is very popular, and I don't think that's going to go away. Now, it's going to hurt the other schools, the lesser schools, but the schools like you see in this photo, in the graphic here, Florida and UConn, it's not going to hurt them. And March Madness is not going to be affected by this, in my opinion. This is a tournament that people are going to continue to watch every single year. And I think as long as the product is good, it doesn't matter what teams move on. If the games are good, if they're exciting, and you get these exciting finishes, it doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter. But I understand why there are some complaints. Look, I don't think the first round was the greatest, but we've gotten some good games, and we are going to get some really good games as we move along into the tournament. So I think it's just people finding things to complain about, because that's what people do. They just complain. Any little thing that dissatisfies them. I mean, look at the last 2 years. Who won the championship? The best team won the last 2 years. There was no Cinderella team that went on this run. And if we're going to say this about March Madness, why don't we say this about, some of the other sports as well? Let's talk about, not that this is really a great comparison. Let's talk about the NFL. When's the last time a Cinderella NFL team won the Super Bowl? Let's see. Let's go back the last 5 years. So you had the Eagles. Were they a Cinderella team? No. The Chiefs? No. The Bucks? I mean, I guess you could say, well, Tom Brady went to the Bucks and they won, well, also you could say Matthew Stafford going to the Rams. But yeah, they weren't Cinderella teams. And then the Chiefs before that. I mean, they won their first championship in a long time, but I wouldn't consider them a Cinderella team. The Patriots. I mean, what about, I think the Eagles, when they won with Nick Foles, is a Cinderella story because Carson Wentz got hurt and then, Nick Foles comes in and he starts the final few games of the regular season and then they go into the postseason and they go on this magical run with him as the quarterback. But I don't think that was a Cinderella team because that was the number 1 seed. I would say you'd have to go back to, could you say the Ravens when they won with Flacco? Or even, the Giants definitely. Ravens, you could, because Flacco played really well in those playoffs. But I don't know. I feel like since then we really haven't seen a Cinderella story or a Cinderella team go on this magical run in the playoffs and win the Super Bowl. That hasn't happened recently. And then the NBA, you look at the teams that have won. The Celtics, they were the best team last year. You had the Nuggets, the Bucks, the Warriors. The Lakers won in the bubble. I don't know what you would call that. That was just an odd year, but yeah, it's just. I think it again. I just think it's just a way for people to complain. Now, I understand it's a problem for the lesser schools, but it's just I I think for the fans, as long as the games are good and they're exciting, I just I don't think it matters to them. I mean, that's really what I care about is just the games are good. But I don't know. Maybe I'm dense on this subject. Sorry if I went off on a tangent with the past champions, but um, in the major sports leagues. But yeah, I just I don't know. I don't like the argument. I think this tournament is incomplete. Let's see how it finishes out. But I think to say that it could be one of the worst is just I think is lunacy. Because again, we got some really good games over the weekend. Really exciting finishes. But that's what I think. Let me know what you guys think, though. Are you disappointed with the tournament? I think the tournament's been solid, and it's only going to be better with the later rounds coming up. You got the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 this weekend. So before we go to break, just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate, get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day. So any contribution you can make to this show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, we will continue to talk about Aaron Rodgers, some recent reports on what he desires in his next team, and we'll talk about whether or not he should have stayed in Green Bay. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.